Redditors who spend a lot of time in seclusion, at sea, in the air or out in the wilderness, what's the creepiest or most mysterious thing you've seen, found or experienced? TLDR, was out in the mountains for 4 days by myself. Felt like I was being followed over 30+ miles. First night I slept not in my tent. It was destroyed and cut to pieces. On a 2-week solo backpacking trip I had 4 days in seclusion between ranger station check-ins. On the first day of the seclusion, I felt like I was being stalked. As I lay in my tent that night I could hear what sounded to me like footsteps around my camp but never coming too close. In the morning I checked all around and found no evidence of footprints or having any wildlife around me. I broke down camp and took off trying to put it behind me. The second night was the same thing. I grew so paranoid that when I would hike during the day I would go over rocks, walk through streams, anything to try and break the trail so I couldn't be tracked. I'd go around a blind turn and then sit there for an hour waiting to see if something would come behind. At night I couldn't sleep for more than 10-15 minutes before waking up. Finally I got to the ranger station check-in and told them what I had been experiencing. I went and set up camp as close to the station as I could. Later the rangers, they offered for me to sleep on their couch for comfort and so I could actually sleep. I accepted and stayed the night indoors. I walked out to my camp in the morning and it had been destroyed. My tent was cut on the side. Sleeping bag ripped and backpack turned inside out. The rangers came and reported it. Took pictures and everything. I ended up getting one of the rangers to give me a ride back to base camp and going home the next day. While out fishing I became good friends with a fat beaver. He chilled next to me while I fished for about 2 hours, just watching me cast and catch fish. We watched an osprey dive into the lake and get a base, which was an amazing moment. When the sun started setting he sauntered back into the lake and we went our separate ways. The best fishing experience I had so far. While on deployment my ship found a ship adrift off the coast of Australia. As an engineer trained for VBSS I was tasked with assessing the ship's mechanical status on boarding. It was deserted. Fish in the hold and stuff set out like people were just there. There was food on the galley area that was still warm, etc. We never found the crew so we towed the boat in for the authorities. Absolutely scared the frick out of people and those who didn't board a ship didn't believe us when we were telling them about the state of it. So, you found the Mary Celeste. My fiance and I went hiking up a mountain in the Pacific Northwest last summer. It's perpetually muddy due to a large number of waterfalls along the sides of the trail, so there's no way you can avoid getting at least a little dirty. Around an hour and a half up the trail, we passed 2 men wearing black suits, black hats, black glasses, holding black leather briefcases and wearing black dress shoes, completely clean dress shoes, and immaculately clean, pressed pants. Not a spot of dirt or a wrinkle on either of their clothes. As we passed each other, one of them whispered something in German. I looked back at them and they were both standing still and looking back at us, staring. One of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and I've had my fair share of strange experiences. Men in black. Not me but someone else's story. I used to work for the US Forest Service and sometimes worked with an older gentleman that had lots of interesting stories from his many years of life. But by far the most chilling tale was from when he was working in a very secluded area of wilderness and was walking through the forest when a thunderstorm hit. He had seen an opening in the hill a little while back and headed to it to take shelter. Once inside he shined his flashlight to check he wasn't going to wake up a bear or something and found the skeleton of a man, sitting in a lawn chair, with a rifle rigged up so he had been able to shoot himself. The skeleton was still wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. I've met a lot of bullshitters in my time and this guy wasn't one. He'd honestly just led an interesting life. Maybe I've been playing too much Fallout but my first thought would have been to take the rifle and any holotapes around his body. I was in a remote area surveying populations of various organisms in mountain streams. One morning an older man crossed the stream I was standing in. We both froze for a second and he continued on his way. He didn't have any gear with him and it's a 15-20 mile hike from the nearest dirt road. My point is he wasn't just casually wandering through. So I worked at a ranch in southern Arizona, right on the border. I didn't really consider it to be secluded because I had horses and cows. In hindsight, I guess it was really lonely because sometimes they'd talk back to me. Anyways, doing fence borders with a guy from another camp and we had to go down into this dry riverbed. As we round the bend we see a bunch of beat up trucks sitting there armed to the teeth. Turns out we ran into some kind of big deal for a cartel. The other guy told me to keep steady and we just walked straight through them on our horses. Everyone staring at us, looking like they were ready to shoot us up if we made one false move. I asked about it when we got to the other side without turning into Swiss cheese and the more experienced rancher told me, the cartel only cares about border patrol and cops. They know this is a ranch, and they know we roam around here, and they know we don't say much. Reason being, if they ever assumed the ranchers were the snitches, they could easily find our little ranch houses. Only had one person to so many acres. Could have been offed and left there for many days before someone noticed. With all that in mind, I had a very passive relationship with those kind from then on. No country for old men. I was running on a logging road in central Wisconsin and stopped because I felt like I was being watched. It was just an instinctive feeling. That's when I noticed a large wolf step out of the forest about 50 yards ahead of me. It was just staring and I stared back. After about 30 seconds of us checking each other out it just slipped back into the woods and was gone. I kept running in the same direction but never really shook the feeling of being watched. I guess it's not that scary because wolves rarely attack people, but you betcha it was creepy enough being alone out there. I was on the bow of a sailboat crossing the Atlantic in pretty heavy winds, going about 15 knots. Crew had to be stationed alone on the bow in 2-hour shifts at all times, keeping an eye out for anything in the water. About 10 meters away from me I see a weird glint in the water. Then I realize it's a partially submerged shipping container. Before I had time to even open my mouth, we passed it by, missing it by a few feet. And that's the story of how I nearly got shipwrecked in a storm in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I realize it's a partially submerged shipping container. I've heard of this, but yours is the only first-hand account I've heard. So out where I live it's just outside of a town nestled at the bottom of mountains. For your information I live in Australia, and it's not too secluded since I live with my family and you'll generally come across someone's property every 500 meters but there are some stretches where you won't see a house for a km. One night my mum and I are coming home pretty late at night and we were just talking and listening to the radio. We come around a corner and we both saw this freaking creature that I still don't know what it is till this day. But it had the body the size of a medium dog, mangy looking black fur, an almost abnormally large head, big green eyes, which was the first thing I noticed, but most weirdly an almost impossibly long and thin neck, like it shouldn't be able to support the large head. My mother and I are freaking cussing like sailors at this point and make a U-turn around to get a better look at it, and within 10 seconds there was no trace of it. Normally I'd brush this off as probably a wild dog but the body just didn't look like a dig and it was too big for a cat, even a wild one. The real scary part is that my family and I have seen that maybe 2 to 3 times now almost exclusively late at night. However my so's father has said that he's also seen it twice. Once at night and once at daytime and I get the feeling we're not the only people in town to have seen it. I don't live in Tasmania, so it's pretty much impossible or dang near impossible to be a Tasmanian devil or thylacine. When I was a scout in Iraq, I was setting up a concealed observation post when we saw the largest cat through our thermals. Like lion, cheetah, leopard, the thermals were fuzzy, but we could identify size based on distance with the laser rangefinder. The thing is all 3 of those animals used to live in Iraq, but they have been long since extinct in the area. Mountain lions have been extinct in Michigan for a long time but I've seen 3. DNR later confirmed they had returned to the state. One cat was estimated to travel 1,000 miles from out west. It's possible. Driving through the middle of Montana one night, going about 100 miles per hour, past something on the side of the interstate that looks like a mangled body, turned around at the next pass, came back, definitely a body, put my lights on it and tried to call 911 on my cell. No reception. Got in the car to see if I could pick up cell reception. Lights were still on. Nothing there but the blood splatters. Drove away quick. Never get out. I was on an outward bound trip in the White River National Forest in Colorado. A part of OB trips is a solo, which can be anywhere from 12-48 hours in which the participants are by themselves with a journal and some snacks. I set up a sweet tent in a tree grouping. It had rained the night before so the ground was pretty soft. After setting up I walked around the area. I felt pretty tired and decided to take a nap. For 8 hours. I woke up in the middle of the night to a bunch of twigs cracking. It turned on my torch to look to see if it was the instructors or any kind of animal. I even called out, "Hey, you good?" Not sure why I said it that way. Nothing. In the morning I found some big cat tracks right by my tent that were not there when I took my nap. It was really unnerving knowing that a mountain lion was near me when I was sleeping. I told the guides about it and they got really particular about keeping our food away from where we were sleeping. I went on a 2.5 week long hike in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, like a couple of hours from even the smallest of towns. One night, I decided to set up camp on a ridge line overlooking a valley with a dirt road bisecting it. Most nights I would have had a small fire, but it was breezy and was cutting across the ridge pretty hard. I think the weather saved my life. At about 10 PM, a truck drove down the road and there was a rhythmic pattern of door opens. Dome light comes on. Driver grabs something from the passenger floorboard, drops it out of the truck, closes the door, drives slowly for 20 seconds, and repeats. He did that for what looked like a mile. I thought it was weird, but whatever. 15 minutes later, a different vehicle, a Suburban, drive up along the road. The driver was holding a flashlight out the window and stopped in the same spots the truck did. Open door, pick up something. Close door, drive, open door. Pick up something. Drive. I don't know what the frick it was, but I'm convinced that I would have ended up with a couple more bullets in me than I'd like if I had that campfire. Mostly likely a drug drop. The tactic would allow the bundles to be spread out more in case one was discovered. Serious, I was living in a dirt floor cabin for about 6 months. I would pack a lunch and hike out half a day in random directions. One day I found an abandoned hotel with an attic full of bats. The old kitchen was full of taxidermy. Not abandoned old taxidermy, current taxidermy, in various states of finish. There was a closet with stacks of dead birds, tools, woodworking tools and glass for the display cases, etc. I noped out of there in a hurry. I took my brother there later because he didn't believe me, so I have a witness. Abandoned hotel. Taxidermy. Say hello to Norman Bates for me. More mysterious than creepy. We were camping in Montana near Yellowstone Park at a small campground. It was the off season and there were maybe 5 other people there, including a couple 3-4 spots down who had a large dog with them in their RV. I walked by and the dog was friendly so I petted it and talked to it and went on my way. Later that night I am sitting watching the sunset and reading on my Kindle when a cold nose bumps up under my arm. Like dog does when it wants attention. I figured it was the dog and started scratching its head. Before I could look around, my friend came around the corner and froze with a look of fright on his face. I was scratching the head of a pretty big grey wolf. I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to keep touching it but I didn't want to stop and pee it off either. I scratched for maybe 5-10 more seconds and it just looked at me like thanks, bro, and walked off into the woods. We went to a hotel that night. My guess was the wolves in the area have gotten used to human visitors. People have probably fed them too, so they aren't really wary of people anymore. I've seen similar things with deer, and they are way more skittish than wolves. I was 13 and on a week-long camping trip. There were 2 adults and 5 other kids my age. One night we had spent all day kayaking and got caught in a deluge that threw off our whole schedule for the day. We couldn't quite make it to the location where we were supposed to set up camp for the night before sunset, so we just settled a few meters off of the river. We were so exhausted that the adults didn't even want to build a fire. Since we didn't have much light and it was hot, they told us that we didn't have to build our shelters, we could just lay out in our sleeping bags. Everyone put their sleeping bags near a clearing that was created by a felled tree, but I saw the hole created by the roots and thought that there were possible creepy crawlies living in it. So I set my sleeping bag a little further back, about 4 meters away from the clearing. I woke up a few hours later to these rapid clicking sounds and sniffing. Thanks to the internet I later identified it as deer noises. There were a bunch of them. The clicking grew closer and was surrounded me on all sides. I had my flashlight but I didn't want to shine it because I was afraid to scare the deer creatures because I thought they would trample me. The most vocal deer then stepped on my sleeping bag and eventually sat down on it. I could hear the other deer get comfortable too. After a while I allow myself to peek out, not wearing my glasses, and I see maybe 15 deer creatures all just watching the other campers. After several hours I fell asleep and woke back up as they were leaving at sunrise. It was wholesome creepy. TLDR. A herd of deer watched a group of campers sleep all night. One lay down on my sleeping bag with me inside. That's cool. I remember reading a long time ago. Lost child in wilderness overnight. Search crew found him safe and sound and warm in AM. Looked like an elk had bedded down beside child all night. Mother Nature. I'm a tall and skinny guy and after reading through all of the comments in this thread, I've decided to stop wearing my novelty antler helmet when I go out on solo hikes. Chill on the running at superhuman speed through dense brush as well. My parents bought a house in the mountains near national forest land around the time I was in 9th grade. I loved the woods and nature, so I would sneak out at night and walk through the forest all the time. A winter night in a forest in northern Utah is amazing. They can also be terrifying. I later learned to identify some of the more common animal calls and cries, but at the time I knew nothing about any of that. So as I'm wandering alone through this forest one time I heard the most blood-curdling and terrifying scream I have ever heard. I froze the second I heard it, lowered to the ground and didn't move for what seemed like forever. Eventually I heard some quiet scuffling and turned to see a fox run across the dry riverbed near where I was. Scared the absolute crap out of me. If you've never heard a fox cry, it is the scream of nightmares. You see all kinds of cool stuff in the forest if you can be slow and quiet. Foxes are the creepiest MF if you don't know what you're hearing. It's like a mix of baby crying and a woman being murdered. I camped by myself in northern MN by boat. Found my spot but saw an unidentifiable creepy blob underwater. Set up my tent etc. Went fishing but curiosity led me to the blob again and I finally figured out it was a large dead deer contorted and missing its abdomen. Later I noticed bark scraped off tree about 8 featuring up. Bear sign. It was getting dark. And as you looked closer at the deer in the water, you noticed your reflection. You are a bear. I used to spend a lot of time hiking solo. The creepiest thing I ever saw was another human, in camouflaging clothes, hiding off the edge of a trail in the brush and trees and obviously keeping an eye on anyone who happened by. This wasn't in an area where hunting is allowed, just a county area with some hiking biking trails, and lots of spots to go off trail, and he wasn't fishing. Here, there is just a few meters of dense brush and trees between me and the river. I pretended I didn't see him, walked a bit, pulled out my phone, called someone, and stayed on the phone until I was near people. Until then, I was always pretty comfortable by myself in the woods for hours. Now I carry a quality knife. Just not knowing is enough to creep me out. Clarity and I can shoot. Actually a gunnery sergeant taught me to be a decent shot. I don't have anything against the proper use of guns. Hunting for sport people isn't cool imho. I prefer not to own one for personal reasons. I don't spend much time in seclusion, but I still have a story. I live in rural Ohio. One of my friends owns a nice barn and farmhouse out in the sticks where the buses don't run and there's no service. He doesn't actually live there. His family owns the house for shiggles. They're millionaires. We've never ran there and it's pretty scenic woods so we decided we'd give it a shot. He and I ran cross country and our team went to state that year to run so we were in really good shape. We get to his barn and plan on running 8 miles near a road and then through the woods. We have GPS watches so we can just make our own path and either turn back at 4 miles or make a looping path if we so desire. After about 2 miles of running on the road we took a random gravel road through the woods and there was a hiking path through it so we decided to take it. We live in the country so it really isn't a big deal. We've done this sort of thing before. I've gotten lost in the woods and in runs a few times throughout high school. But we had never done it here so far away from home. I don't run with my glasses on and I'm blind as a bat. I'm making good pace when all of a sudden I smack into my friend. I look up and he's just standing there. I focus at what he's looking at and there's bear trap hanging on a branch in front of us. Looking around, they're all blowing in the breeze. Off in the middle, perched up against tree, was something that resembled a man. My friend pushed me and told me to run. We didn't say a word until we got back to the main road because we ran so fast. Turns out my friend saw what looked like a bloody scarecrow leaning against the tree. He saw bear traps on the ground. 2. 1. 3 of us were sitting around a campfire on a bluff overlooking Bell Lake in Kalani Provincial Park, when suddenly there was a blinding flash that lit up the entire sky. We were stunned. After several moments of silence, one guy said, "Everyone check your watches." To this day, none of us have any idea what that flash was, but we all saw it, and it freaked us out pretty good. 2. Another time, I was house sitting for my parents who were traveling overseas. It was maybe 11:30 p.m. and I was sitting on the picnic table, smoking a cig, when I heard a screech owl calling. I can do a fairly decent screech owl call, so I started calling it in. After several minutes of back and forth, the owl arrived on a branch about 8 feet above my head. So it was checking me out, doing that crazy owl thing with its head rotating all the way around, and I was checking him out and rotating my head as far as I could. All of a sudden, a large shadow streaked over my head, and the screech owl was gone. Several feathers drifted slowly downward. It was then that I remembered that great horned owls eat screech owls. One had swooped in and snatched that cute little guy right in front of my eyes. What freaked me out the most was that this huge bird, with a 5-foot wingspan, is absolutely dead silent in flight. I basically grew up outside. I don't get scared in the dark. Noises don't bother me, but that silent assassin owl scared the crap out of me. I had to go inside. One more. A few of us were night fishing for catfish from the bank of the Hocking River. None of us actually heard it, but we were all suddenly aware of some presence near us. Naturally, we all start asking WTF was that, so out come the flashlights, and we start looking around. We discovered some very large paw prints right behind where we were sitting. I'm not sure what kind of cat it was, but its paws were bigger than my fist. We got the heck out of Dodge. Man, you made that screech owl think he was gonna get some screech owl loving, and instead. I usually sit on my own with a clear view of the back garden to work. I once saw my cat come into the garden with an omelette in his mouth. Omelette. This happened once while camping with my then fiance and a friend of ours. Camped out in the woods in the middle of nowhere on a hot July day. Night came, and it was a full moon, so around midnight we decided we'd take a hike around for fun. We basically hiked a trail for a bit and then turned around and hiked it back to the campsite. When we were almost back, we saw a McDonald's cup sitting at the edge of the path. I found this strange as I didn't see the bright red and yellow container when we began the venture, but whatever. However, my buddy decided to open the cup up and found ice cubes at the bottom. That day was easily 90 plus F, and at night it was still in the high 70s, so that ice would not have lasted long. Somebody was definitely out there by us, and we never found another sign of them. No sound of a car, walking or rustling, nothing. We decided to pack up and go home that night. The thought of an unblinking Ronald McDonald clown is horrifying. Out at sea late at like maybe 2 AM and just seeing a fin pop up above the water near your boat in the complete silence and black ocean. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.